Basketball Manitoba podcast, we have James Bambury. James is the current head coach of the Brandon Bobcats women's program. He's been coaching for over 15 years. His most recent coaching experience was as interim head coach at Queen's University in the 2019-2020 season, where he led the Gaels to a 16-8 season and reached the number 3 national ranking. Prior to that season, he spent 7 years as an assistant coach for the Gaels. He also coached 2 seasons as the head coach at Royal Military College, 3 seasons as head coach of Leeds Metropolitan University and Leeds Carnegie Basketball Club in England. In addition to that, he was an assistant coach with the England University Games team, associate coach of the England Under-18 national women's team, and head men's development coach at Leeds Metropolitan. He played 3 years at Queen's University before moving on to coaching. James, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Darcy.
So offline, there's always a little preamble, a little conversation that takes place. And I was saying, I don't know you like at all. And I was like, this is going to be interesting because you're super new. I mean, you're not from Manitoba. You're not someone who grew up here. I've interviewed people who were from Manitoba and then now live in other places. So this is the first time I've interviewed someone who's brand new to Manitoba and really has no connection, as far as I know, to Manitoba. So, I guess the first question I have is, what are your first, thoughts? You're living in a small town in Manitoba. You went through your first winter, and this is all during a pandemic. So, I don't know, just let me know. What do you think?
Firstly, I have to say, one, I love the podcast. I love what you guys are doing. I have been, a listener from the jump, so I really appreciate being on it, which is great. Now to the winter. No, I always joke. I'm a bit of a nomad, so I've traveled around. I've moved over 14 times in my life. Like I've a military brat, right?
Okay, yeah.
So I'm used to different things and the one thing I will say is the amount of people that keep mentioning this is the worst winter we have seen in. After a while, you're hoping like, I hope this truly is, and you guys aren't just setting me up for something. But no, it's been fantastic. We really enjoyed it. As you said, kind of the smaller town really creates this community feel, which is a lot of fun. Like I'll never forget that my first week in town, someone stopped me on the road and said, "Hey, you're the new women's basketball coach. I saw your picture in the paper."
That's cool.
Yeah, it was really cool. It was one of those things that you're just like, oh, like this is awesome. This is fun, and not that it's not the reason why you do it, but it's always nice to be a part of a community that pays attention.
Absolutely. And obviously I have a lot of experience playing in Brandon in high school, and I'm playing against Brandon. So going out there when I played in college, coaching when I was coaching. So the one thing about Brandon, and they do have, obviously these last couple of years, maybe not, but the BSSI tournament, super big high school tournament, awesome. So you go out there for that and playing, and they really support basketball. And that's a really, really cool thing. And it is a really small community, but basketball strong, and that's what's cool. Obviously the Bobcats have been there for a while, and it's a smaller town. So I think that's what the feedback I've gotten from, I've been interviewing I think you're like the fourth or fifth Brandon connection that we've interviewed so far, and everyone always has like just the fondest memories of settling there and just and being in a small town that supports it, because most of the people don't grow up there. They tend to come in and then they stay and like, oh, it's awesome, they love it here. So I'm sure again you're going to have tons more memories moving forward and meaningful connections that are made in Brandon. But now I kind of want to go backwards. We kind of talked about where you are now. How did you get involved to the game in the game of basketball? Who introduced you to it? You said you were kind of a military brat, so you probably, traveling around a lot. How'd you fall in love with the game?
I joke with my wife and anyone around me all the time. Honestly, it's the sound of a bouncing ball. So this is quite literally what happened. Leading into my 3rd birthday, I asked for a basketball hoop. And and I asked my parents why. They go, "You're always into tall things." Like it was one of those. But really what the sound of the basketball represented to me was community, right? Like
Mm.
relatively every 2 years we were on the move. So it would basically be, you would be on the move on the summer, you'd get one summer in that, the following summer in that place, and then we'd be on the move the next summer. And so I think the basketball for me was just the sound of that ball meant like I could look out the window, I'd see someone else who had a connection to me because they had a ball in their hand.
Mm.
And so then it would just be like, all right, well, I hear it going this way. So mom, dad, I'll be back, ball under my arm. I walk down the road and just find the closest park.
No way.
So that every single city I ever went to.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, the sound of the bouncing ball just kept continuing me throughout my life, really.
Mm-hmm.
And even to the point, I might be jumping ahead here, even to the point of when I started coaching.
Yeah.
So I finished my time at Queen's, and then in a roundabout way met my wife on a cruise, and she's from Pittsburgh. So I decided that I'm going to do my master's in the States to be closer. And I end up at a small predominantly female school, Carlow University in Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm.
And I was walking through campus one day and I actually heard the ball bouncing. And I'm like, oh, there's a gym here. Because they only had women's programs. They didn't have any men's teams.
Yeah, yeah.
So I end up walking in and one of their players is sitting there shooting. And trying not to be a weirdo standing watching someone shoot, I just offered to rebound.
Yeah.
And so I started rebounding for her. And then next thing you know, we started talking and I started pushing her through shooting drills that I used to do as a player. And that led me to running their summer program and doing all this kind of stuff.
No
But
way.
yeah, it was quite literally, yeah, the sound of a bouncing basketball has just led me by the nose, I guess, or by the ears, I suppose, throughout my life.
Wow. That's interesting. And it's funny because the thing that when you were saying, you know, I played basketball, I would hear the ball, I would go, and you traveled every year, you'd be moving around. It always reminds me of, you know, I've traveled quite a bit and I have friends that I've obviously met through basketball that have traveled. And that's the one thing, because I've been to places where they didn't speak English and I didn't speak their language, but guess what? I was playing pickup games with them. And now all of a sudden I'm joking with people. I don't even know what they're saying. And they speak a little bit of English, but that's the one thing is basketball and like sport generally. But I always say that basketball, there's a certain, basketball is a little different than other sports. And I mean, I think everyone who's listening to this kind of probably agrees with that. Every sport has its reasons for being different. But the thing about basketball that I like is there is this really strong culture around it and a love for it, because it's like you can play it by yourself. Like you just saw that person, they're shooting the gym by themselves. Yeah. And yes, you can work on, you know, volleyball, spike and all that, but it's not the same. It's just not the same. You're recreating so much of the game when it's just you and a hoop and a ball. You can do so much, right? And so it's interesting to hear you say that, because again, I've had similar experiences like that where you're just traveling around and you're just playing basketball. As long as you have a ball and you can play, like you can interact with anybody, make new friends anywhere. And so it's curious, how many, and I'm just personal question, how many places have you lived in? Do you know?
I counted one time and I think I've lived in 24, 26 different residences.
No way. And these are all in Canada?
No, I spent 4 years or 3 years in the UK, where we moved around to multiple places. I spent 2 different spots in the UK. I lived in England I lived in the US 2 different times. Mm-hmm. A lot of different places in Ottawa, Halifax. My father was a Navy man who didn't want to go back to sea. So it was basically National Defense Headquarters or reserve units. So that's where we kind of Halifax to Ottawa, back and forth an awful lot. So it was really nice. He made the choice not to go away, because he wanted to be around and be at games and everything else. So I'm forever grateful for that I wasn't without him for 9 months at a time. But awesome. It certainly led to more moving around. Yeah.
So then, adjusting to Brandon, this is easy. This is easy work for you. This is like, it's just every day. This is what I do.
The number one thing I will say is, and having watched basketball my whole life and college sports and everything, like they weren't kidding about, like in the States where they call it the Big Sky Conference. They weren't joking. Like when I go for hikes, when I first got here, I couldn't help but just keep looking around and be like, wow, this is really big.
Yeah, no kidding. That is true. Hey, just the vast, like it's just open. So then you have a bit of a different upbringing than anyone I've interviewed. And I would just say than most people, right? The other military, brats or whatever, they would understand you. But typically people stay in the same place, they grow up in the same place, and then they find a mentor, right? Or a mentor finds them, whatever. And then from there, those people encourage them to, get better at the sport, or commit themselves in a specific way, or they teach them things. So did you have mentors?
I would say, even when they didn't know they were mentors, I think I had them.
Okay.
I've always been a very kind of like all in person. So I was one of those people that if my coach was saying, oh, you need to try this, needs to be at 100%, or this needs to be done 100 times, I was physically the one trying to do it at 100% at all times. So I think I learned a lot from coaches because I took everything very earnestly. So I was learning as we went. Like I remember those, and this is probably not the conversation that we have. Well, definitely not the conversation I have anymore, but like, I'm sure you probably had are you hurt or injured conversation.
Yeah.
Like I viscerally remember those conversations from the age of like 8 all the way up. So I think I was probably mentored by a lot of coaches just because I listened a lot, kind of had to, I wasn't getting by on my natural athletic talent. But I've been very fortunate where like I said, I think my parents have been a massive influence. When it's only your parents and your sister with you all the time, I think you learn so much from them and you take on so much. But going through my high school, I joke with people all the time, and I know it sounds a little bit weird, but I've had a bit of a Forrest Gump life. And what I mean,
sounds like it based off the walking into a gym and rebounding thing.
Quite literally, yes. And I've been thinking, like, I've thought about it a lot because people ask me when you're a coach, right? Like when you're at dinner or when everything, people want to talk about a lot of the time the more interesting or unique job. So you end up like, oh, I coach women's basketball in university. Like, really? What is that like? And they always ask, right? And so with this Forrest Gump life, it's one of the things that he did in the movie that I always appreciated was how genuine, earnest, 100% he was into everything he did. It was like football, take the ball, go for it.
Yeah, it was like so literal.
Just go for it. And there was never, why would I do that? Or there was never that may not look cool. And that's just never been me. I've always been the like, hey, do you think you can do this? Yeah, sure, no problem. Let's go. And I think because of that, I've ended up in some really unique situations, and I've been able to take away so much from those unique situations because I've always just been all in on everything that I've ever done. And
that's interesting.
So that was pretty unique, but like, because of that, I've also searched out those people in my life. So you might even remember the name Les Barry, who was a coach at Brandon, was a coach at Acadia. He was actually my 9th grade club coach.
No way.
Oh yeah, no. But like, I distinctly remember probably, I don't know, like 9 or 10 things he specifically taught me. And then I moved on. Andrew and Anthony McNeil were my high school coaches who played at Mount St. Vincent under actually Rick Plato, who's now the head coach at Dow. And so I had them to kind of learn from and take little bits from. And then I was at Queens. So I think the mentorship really came down to just being willing and listen.
Yeah.
Like just be around, be in the gym. When coach says, oh, I'm running an extra practice. When coach says, oh, do you want to come in and work with someone? It was just like, yeah, absolutely. Let's go.
Yeah. Well, that totally makes sense. I think that, there are a few, there's obviously many different types of people, but one of the personas that I see are the one that you're explaining, right? That's like, you're almost seeking that stuff out all the time. And then there's the other people who are kind of more coy, but then they need that mentor to kind of grab them and say, come on, like, come with me, like, you're doing this. And then eventually, oh yeah, I can do this. Right. So you had mentioned though, you obviously played at Queens, but you're traveling around everywhere. So where did you go to high school?
I went to high school in Nova Scotia at Sackville High.
Okay.
And I'm trying to think Steve Bauer went to Sackville High, and who he works with the Canadian women's national team. I'm pretty sure you had her on, Joanne Wells. You had her on the podcast, correct?
Yep.
Her and I were high school mates. We were in the same. We were in the same grade, and we
Oh
both went to
man,
Sackville High at the exact same time.
no way.
Yeah.
She's awesome.
Yeah. Oh, Tanya McKay went to
Tanya,
Lower
of
Sackville.
course.
Went to Sackville High.
I was just
Yeah.
gonna
So
say. Yeah. That well, okay. So this is such an interesting thing. So getting back to, and there's a little bit of a tangent, but you had mentioned the traveling, and then I told the story about how, no matter where you travel, if you play basketball, you can find kind of like a group, even if you don't even speak the same language. So another thing that I noticed by this, and I'm sure you've had tons of experiences like this, we're having one right now, by the way, is you don't think you know somebody, but because of the basketball community, you're actually only one person away from knowing that person. So like I don't know you. I know you now, but like I could have met you anywhere, and then like, oh yeah, Tanya and Joanne, like, oh yeah, of course I know them, right? And so you're one person away. I always say like the basketball community is so small, like, once you're up to a certain level of it, you're like 1 to 2 people away from NBA players, literally, like, and coaches, right? Because I know that it is a very small community, and so I'm sure you've had those types of experiences, hey, where you're like, hey, oh, like, I know
so
that
many.
person.
I joke basketball makes the world so small. Like, it is
Yes,
incredible.
yes.
So I have 2, like, so this is what I do with the team. Story time with James. Okay. I have 2 really good ones, like really, really good ones. And so when I first came back, I was at the Royal Military College. And then after the Royal Military College, unfortunately, canceled its program, I moved to Queens. And while at Queens, I would still had a lot of my connections in the UK, of course. And so I would constantly have like friends and close friends reaching out to me, being like, oh, I have a player for you. And at Queens, we didn't have an international waiver, so we couldn't work that out. But one of the emails I got was, Coach James. I never be called Coach James. Call me James. That's easy. But it was Coach James. You won't remember me, but I remember you. Okay. I came to every one of your club games from this time to this time. It was 2 years when I was in England, and it was because Rahana Khalil, who played for me, who was from Manchester, was kind of her it person, that person she wanted to be. So she traveled an hour every Saturday to come watch us play, and an hour home. I'm now of university age, and I want to come play for you.
No way.
I swear to God, that is what happened. And it was she was 7 or whatever it was. And it was 9 years later. And she's like, I'm now getting close to university and I want to come play.
That's crazy.
So it was so weird. Like a 7-year-old in the crowd in a game in Manchester is reaching out to me saying, I watched you coach, and now blah, blah, blah.
That's wild.
Yeah. And now number 2. So when I was working with the U18, U20, again, I was very much a volunteer person where someone goes, I'm driving to go watch this training camp, or I know you're working with U18 kids. If you want to come with me, you can come with. Sure, no problem. I'll be there. Let's go. And I'm very fortunate. I have an understanding wife who totally appreciates this and lets me do all these fantastic things. So we get there, we're going through some of the breakdown of what like the U20 program is going to be about and how we're going to coach, and how I did a lot of regional stuff. So I was kind of there as an associate during the actual practices. But then when they got, when everyone went home, the people who were in my region, I worked with individually. And anyways, we had a chance. It was during the men's Great Britain training camp leading into the 2012 Olympics. And you know who the 2 coaches for the Great Britain men's team were?
No, who are they?
The head coach is Chris Finch, now the head coach of the Minnesota Timberwolves. And the assistant coach was Nick Nurse, the head coach of the Toronto.
No way.
Yeah. So now I'm sitting on the sideline, and they're running through their practice and everything else. And then Chris goes to work with the men's team or work with the coach staff. And Nick Nurse stays extra time and runs a shooting clinic for all the coaches who came to watch practice.
Nice.
And probably stayed for an hour longer than he was meant to stay, sat there and answered questions, and he kind of took us through his journey of how he was, a player in Iowa, and then how he made it to England as a player and then became a player coach. And so speaking of, you're only one step away from an NBA, an NBA player, an NBA coach, you never know when you're going to be on the floor, you're going to be able to learn from. And that was quite literally me being like, hey, I'll jump in the back seat. And I end up being, and being like courtside watching 2 NBA coaches work.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. I love hearing basketball stories. And I love those types of stories, right? Because it's like, you just, you just never know. But I think that speaks to, 'cause I've heard this from other people, as advice to coaches. It's just like, and one of I think Kirby Shep maybe gave the advice. It was just like, just sit, and you're young, just say yes to everything. Just everything. Like, because if you really want to go into it, and you should be trying to learn and just maximize not only your interactions with people so you can learn more, but just like you're growing your network as well. And then, like you said, like whether it be a player that was 7 watching you play, like if you're not coaching that team, there's all these things. If you're gonna, it's all, and it gets back to your point too. It's like, the Forrest Gump of it all. It's like, just go all in. So just say yes to everything. Hey, you want to come to this, top in the back? Yeah, sure. I guess. Yeah, why not? Like, sounds cool. And
I actually, well, the crazy one is like, that's kind of where my, like, I put in quotation marks, my professional career kind of started. So basically, I start working with the Carlo program over the summer and working with the women there. And my wife gets into a master's program at Leeds Met in England. So I, hand on my heart, I sent an email to the local club and said, hey, look, I'm coming over. I've been working with this program. I played, played in quotation marks. I was on a team for a university for 3 years. And I just want to help. Like, I want to keep doing this. And so he reaches back, Matt Newby, like, geez, I probably owe a lot of what I've done, to his help, assistance, whatever. And he goes, well, I coach at 5-Star Basketball, which is a big camp in the States, one of the first kind of real big camps. And he goes, I have a few friends who are actually going to be in Pittsburgh, where I was going to school, and go work at 5-Star. They'll give me feedback, and then we'll see what we can do. And so that was the first time I ever went to 5-Star Basketball camp. He hooked me up with a few, kind of old heads at the camp. And I think 3 days into the camp, one of the camp leads calls him in England and goes, kids got hustle, kids willing to work, like, you should go for it. And we were at the lunch table, and that was and that was the first job. And Matt goes, fine, then if they sign off, come see me when you arrive, and let's get going. And it was so unique so I spent the whole summer working for 5-Star Basketball. And one of the people, this is just crazy, was a grad assistant at, I want to say it was Emerson College. And him and I connect, and I go, hey, great. Like, we should stay in touch. Like, we get along. He was a little younger than me, I think. And so anyways, I go to England, and then we start bringing across American players. I know it's a long story, but I promise to pay off. We're coming across, we bring across. So I reach out to him and say, hey, look, you have a good program. If you have any guys who want to come across and do their masters and play for our Division I team, like, we'd love to do it. And we never end up getting a player across from him. And 6-7 years later, I'm in a hotel room, and the Cavs announced their new GM, Kobe Altman.
No way.
I swear to you, I go into my Hotmail account and show my wife. I'm like, these are the emails from Kobe Altman that him and I exchanged like 8 years ago about trying to bring players across. Wow. And that was the only reason he was there, was the exact same reason I was there. He was there to coach. He was there to make friends, to see the thing. And then he ended up with, USA Basketball, and probably never remembers meeting me or any of the other stuff. But like, it just shows that, like, how far you can go in a short period of time if you're willing to just be there. For sure.
It's those opportunities. So we got to this because I mentioned, I said you played at Queens, and I said, where'd you go to high school? We went on a tangent, which is fine. But interestingly, on the topic of that, I never thought about that. We were talking about connections and all that stuff. But so I think I've interviewed, you're the fourth, Brandon Bobcat connection that I've interviewed, or Brandon connection. But now it's interesting because the Nova Scotia connection is coming in, which is wild. That's such a wild thing. So you played all your full high school 3 years?
Full high school at Sackville High.
Okay. And then after that, so like you played at Queens. Was that one of those, hey, I walked on? Did you get recruited? What was that like? What was the transition?
Very much a walk-on. Again, going back to Forrest Gump. My father was posted my last year of grade 12. And so basically the plan was, my sister would stay back and go to school and keep going to school. And then I would come with my parents and do my grade 13 year, because it's when they still had OAC in Ontario. So I was like, hey, I need extra help anyways. I got hurt my grade 12 year. So let's see if I can come back and play. My dad goes, well, there's this good school in Kingston, just apply, who knows? So I apply and I don't get in. So I'm like, okay, no problem. Great. Grade 13. Here I go. More high school basketball.
Yeah.
And we arrive at the new house and there's all this welcome to Queens admittance stuff. So I drive that day to Queens and they go, oh, upon review, we sent the wrong letter to 3 people. You have 4 days to decide if you're coming to school here. And so that day I walked in the coach's office and said, you know what, I just got accepted. I'm thinking of walking on. But that decision disappeared because my dad said, you got into one of the best schools in the country, you're going. So it was just basically, that would have been July, beginning of July. And then from that point on, I was all in. All right, I'm going to walk on. Let's go.
Wow. That's so weird. I figured it was going to be something like that. I was like, this is part, like you said, and then you obviously said, you prefaced it like, hey, here's another Forrest Gump moment. I just go with the flow.
Just go with the flow. But like, even then, then I made my connection with Chris Oliver and I played on Ollie's first head coaching team and everything, which has been a weird 20-year relationship as well. So
it's so weird because it's like, I know this is what's going to come from this interview and the story, because I always try to like recap, okay, like, well, what can people take from this? And I already know, like, sometimes we get paralyzed with fear and making decisions. And people like that tend to just like, look, just go here, just do something, right? Like they'll never get started with something because they feel like they have to do it perfectly, or they're scared, or they don't think they're good enough. And again, not everyone is like you where they just do it. But I think that's what someone who isn't like you can take from it. It's like, you know what, it's going to be okay. As long as I go all in on what I'm doing, like the results that are going to come from it are going to give me something, right? Like something is going to come from this. It's when I'm hesitant or I don't commit myself to something where nothing happens because there's no, you're not moving. You're like kind of stuck. This is interesting. It's interesting. I've never actually, I mean, you're the first person in the interview that's, I mean, not really. There's other people. Let me take that back. There's been other people who have kind of been, they're now college coaches, but it's not the way that your story is. It's usually they have a mentor and then they say, you can do this, So, I mean, in saying all that, I mean, the next question is, I mean, you kind of mentioned a cruise and then you walked into a gym. How did you get into coaching college? Was that the story? Is that how you started?
Quite literally, I walked in the gym, started doing that. I was very fortunate. Like the players who were there were very accepting and everything else. I think I listened. We talked about the Ringer and Bill Simmons.
Yep.
He has this idea that every basketball team needs someone with crazy irrational confidence.
Irrational confidence guy. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think from a coaching point of view, for whatever reason, at a young age, I had this crazy confidence. But like I joke, it has a lot more to do with the fact of, throughout my basketball career, I watched so much basketball from the bench that I learned, I learned so much of what I don't want to be or what I don't want to do. So then when I kind of stepped into the coaching realm, it was like, it felt just natural. It felt like, well, I've been doing this, I understand, or I felt like I understood it. I'm sure my coaches at the time didn't understand anything, but that's okay. But yeah, no. So basically the next day, that player goes, can I bring someone else? Sure, no problem. By the end of that week or the following week, the head coach of the actual team calls me and said, I heard you've been working with my players. And so he said it was an NAIA school. Yeah. So not like he was a full-time coach. And he just said, do you want to work with them this summer? And so I coached it was one of the few coaches in the Pittsburgh. It was kind of like the women's league there in the South side. But like here I was coaching NAI players and I was talking with the other teams or talking with the other players like, oh, she's going to Kentucky. She's going to Pitt. She's going to, I'm like, all right, this is going to be interesting. So I had a chance to kind of, get thrown into the fire right away. And so after that, there was only 2 years that I didn't coach. So after that summer, I stopped coaching because I was doing my master's and my teaching certification at the same time. Not a good idea. I didn't coach then.
I've heard that from a few people, by the way.
Yeah, not a good idea. And then I did COVID.
Yeah.
But besides that, I think I went 14 years straight working 100 hours a week or more. So.
Wow. And I'm sure loving every minute of it. Not every minute, but loving the process.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I love that. I love it. So I want to kind of speak a little bit about your process, kind of dig in a little bit more with regards to, now we're talking you as coach. You had mentioned, I don't know if that's something you share with your players, like story time, but
Mhm.
that I'm sure if that's something you do is part of building a culture, right? And I think like the coach, this is obvious when you say it, but sometimes I think coaches forget this, or you lose track. Or when you're learning how to coach, maybe you don't understand it, is what I mean to say, is that it's your job to essentially build the culture, right? Establish certain values, routines, and systems that are going to help, all the players, and help your team as a result of that, right? So what are some of the strategies or tricks or things that you use to build culture with your team?
I would say that the number one thing we need at any point in time as people is a why. Like, why are we doing this? Because ultimately, if you have no why, or if your why is soft or weak, in those moments of challenge, in the moments of conflict, in the moments of failure, whatever, that self-confidence disintegrates, your drive because you're like, oh, why am I really doing this? Right? Like if you're put, one of my old coaches, who would definitely be considered a mentor, and I should have mentioned, I apologize to him, is Dave Wilson. 40 years of coaching in University Basketball in Canada. The guy's a legend and like an encyclopedia of knowledge of coaching. And Dave used to joke, I've upped it now, but he used to call it the $10,000 rule. If there's $10,000 on the other end of the gym, how fast are you running? Okay. And like when you think you can't go anymore, and I say if you do 10 more reps, you get $10,000. I've upped it to 100 because 10 grand with inflation, not as much, right? Yeah. So like all we're really talking about is motivation, right? And so there are certain times I remember puzzle pieces in my life just fitting in perfectly, and I created my own personal why. And my own personal why is to get better mentally, physically, emotionally every single day. And what that truly means, and again, it's drilling down on it, is mentally means at the end of the day, I hope to understand something a little bit better than I did at the beginning. Physically, I want to do something better than I did at the beginning. And then emotionally, I want to be able to deal with something better at the end of the day than I did at the beginning of the day. At the end of the day, if you can say I've done those three things, like that's an amazing day. Like that is what you want to do. So if I can build down or build up, depending upon if you want to look at it as a foundational thought, is, well, okay, if that's my why, then how does this bleed into basketball? So what are, at the end of the day or at the end of a practice, what are players going to understand better, deal with better, do better? And then we do the exact same thing, offense and defense as well, right? Defensively, what's your goal? Your goal is to, an acronym I created called ADD. Your goal is to annoy, deflect, disrupt. Annoy the person you're guarding, deflect the ball as much as possible, disrupt what the offense wants to do. So we have done those to drill down on it. So ultimately, when everything gets difficult, I'm hoping my players will have a why, like in their chest, that answers the questions, not a why in their brain. Because we all know the heart starts beating fast, stuff gets getting tough, you get elbowed in the face, brain shuts down, heart takes over. And so that's really where our culture piece is what are we going to tap into that will connect inside rather than just in their head.
Yeah. I like that. That's great. I think you make a great point just around the idea that it's one thing to understand it, like in a literal sense, like this is my why, and write it down and say it. It's a whole other thing to feel it. And that's like, again, like you just said, it's like, yes, we want our players and just people generally in those tough times to have composure and all that, but emotions will come, and then it's our job to kind of deal with those and acknowledge them. But through that process, if you're grounded in that, in what your whys are, you're not necessarily going to stray too far, right? And you're going to have better control to kind of maintain some of those outcomes that you're looking for. I love that. That's really good. I really only had that one question about culture. We're not going to get into a whole deep basketball conversation. Again, it's more of the story. I do want to.
Sorry, could I jump in? I was going to say, and like I said, there's little moments in your life that you kind of remember, and it kind of here I've had the opportunity to coach some amazing athletes, amazing people. Like I like rattle off people who were able to go to the Olympics and people who were Like I always try to bring up like specific people because I think they need to be recognized. And one is Sophie DeGoody, who was a player who played for me at Queens, just finished probably one of the greatest athletic careers in youth sports history. So she came to Queens, was National Rookie of the Year.
Okay.
She graduated as National Rugby Player of the Year, was an OUA All-Star in basketball, played rugby and basketball all 5 years.
Wow.
She was the most amazing. But like working around those people, you realize something. And it's really funny that the story that I tell about that is actually from when I was in high school. And it was a gym teacher who said it to me. And we were doing the 12-minute run. I don't know if you have to do this in physical education in school or not.
Yeah, yeah.
And there was a kid in our gym class who ran so hard he threw up. And we were all being, silly guys.
Yeah.
Why are you trying so hard? This is silly. What are you doing? And I'll never forget my high school gym teacher, Pat Dunphy, looks at it, he goes, sometimes people don't know how to give less than 100%.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
And that like solidified in my brain, like opened my eyes, just like, dang, okay. And then every time I've met one of these exceptional people, that's exactly who they were.
Yeah.
They just did not know how to give less than everything.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of, that was where,
Well, so again, I've heard different versions of this kind of like thing, and it always shout out to my buddy. He embodies essentially this, right? Very much like you, but just like, just goes hard all the time. And he always brings me back to this movie. It's Higher Learning. I don't know if you remember this movie. And
I do know that movie really well.
Yeah. So Lawrence Fishburne's talking to forget what his name. I don't forget all the people's names in it, but anyways, the guy's a track star, and he goes to him. He's like, I think is Mr. Williams. He calls him Mr. Williams. He's like, what are you, you're racing somebody and they're faster than you. Like, what are you going to do? And he's like, well, I'm just going to run fast. And he's like, no, but like they're faster than you. So what are you going to do? And he gets him to the point of like realizing, he's like, well, I'm going to run faster. And he's like, and they have this aha moment. It's like, so you have been holding back essentially, right? Like you're not going 100% all the time, right? You only do that when you feel like you need to. But if you, if that's your approach to things, then you're going to be missing, coming up short in so many areas, right? Because you can't just turn that off and on. It's like you're going, and this is, again, it gets back to what you're saying. Like either you're just going all in on something. It might, like you said at the beginning, you might look stupid. You might not know what you're doing. It doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, if you're deciding to do it, go and do it, look stupid, make the mistakes, but that's going to be a better outcome, because now when you have the skills and you're going all in, boom, that's where the magic happens, right? Absolutely. So you totally just reminded me of that moment. So, okay, so we're getting close to the end here. I have a few questions to wrap us up here. I think we got 4. So, most memorable basketball story. Now, this is any story you want to tell. I mean, you obviously have so much basketball, like you're playing, you're coaching, whatever story that you feel is one of your most memorable. I'm sure you have a few, but something that comes to mind when I say that.
So many. It's the story that I tell that explains why my wife and I belong together. Okay. So speaking of going all in, my time in Leeds was amazing, fantastic as well. We were in the UK, but also just a lot. So I was substitute teaching to kind of help pay for our, our lifestyle and everything else. And then I was coaching 3 teams and doing all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So anyways, we end up going to the university finals, and we had to actually end up playing Damian Jennings' team, Uwick, who's now the head coach of Calgary. So him and I had been coached against each other a long time ago.
There you go.
And anyways, it was a back and forth. We lose the game by 1 on a bank shot that rolls out. So national championship gone.
Wow.
We go into the locker room. Everyone's crying. Everyone realizes like opportunity missed and everything.
Yeah.
And I walk out of the change room, and I just walk over to my wife, I just need a hug. I'm ready to go. And she looks me dead in the eye, and with as much caring but like intensity as possible, she goes, "We didn't come here to lose."
Damn.
Yeah.
Wow.
But the reason I know it was she was reminding me that like we've put a lot of work into this. Keep pushing. This isn't an all for loss. This isn't a understand something. This is something that we can get better at and we're under control.
Yeah.
The other thing I always say, the reason is she cared as much as I did.
Yeah.
Like she was just there for it. And I think that's my most memorable, because it was that one moment of connection where, you know, like two people kind of come together and you're just like, I feel what you feel what I feel, and that's it. And if anything, that's something that basketball brought to her and I together. So.
Wow. Yeah. That moment of complete, just, I get it. I get you, you get me. We feel exactly the same. And this is it. Yeah. That's awesome. Wow. I was like surprised when you said that. She's like, I was like, damn. It's like, okay, cool.
Yeah. She was also the one, I'm not lying. She was also the one that when we were there, we were trying to build up our fan base.
Yeah.
So she went out and made, I think it was 20 or 25 t-shirts that said Carnegie Cluster. And we started naming our fan group. Wow. And she would bring them, hand them out, and then get them back and wash them during the week, and then hand them out during the, yeah. Wow, so she was, all in.
She's all in. That's awesome. I love hearing that. Okay. So next question is your most memorable player or teammate? I mean, you probably coached way more people than you played with, but someone who stands out. And I always preface this to, like, it doesn't have to be like the best player, just someone who's memorable, like for whatever reason. I'm sure every coach says this, and I've definitely heard all the other coaches say how, you know, how many memorable players are. I would say from someone I played with point of view, it's without a doubt Will Featherston, huh? So I know that's a long last, I think 14 letters in that last name. Will was one of the first people I met when I got to Queens. Him and I showed up so I went to my coach's office. I went to Coach Mason's office, said, I want to try out. He goes, we have an open run today. Come to it. And I met Will there the very first day. And ironically, I played behind him for the 3 years that I was, and we did the exact same things. And he was just a little bit better than me at everything that we did. But I think we made a connection because it was someone who loved basketball as much as me, but someone who knew how to work more efficiently, harder, whatever. And I think I kind of just attached myself to him because he could do all the things that I did well, but better. And then he knew things that I didn't know. And I've always been so drawn to people who have knowledge or skills that I don't have. And so this has been the connection that him and I played together. Him and I stayed in contact. Whenever I have a coaching or basketball question, him and I just connect. And to the point that when I came back to RMC, him and I got together over pizza, and I offered him the job on the spot. Like, you got to join me. Let's go. So he jumped on board with that staff. That's sweet.
Literally had never coached before. And so him and I have been like in the weeds, like won our first game, lost our next 43. So we've been in it together. So he's my stats guru. He's my sounding board.
Nice.
Probably, he's my dude.
I love it. That's great.
He was also, I will point out, we had a 253 shooting drill that we would run. So you'd shoot 253s in various ways. And so I finished it. It was the greatest day of my life. I'm like, what'd you get, Will? And he's like, what'd you get first? I'm like, I think it was 207 or 213. And I was like, 213 of 250. Like, oh, come on. And I was like, what about you? And he looks at me and he goes, 223. And it was just, dang it.
He's always a step ahead.
Always that step ahead. But I loved it. I think those connections that you get in the gym when you're sweating with someone is just awesome.
Unbelievable. Absolutely. Those are really special moments. People who know, if you've experienced that, you just know it's, And then like my buddy that I mentioned before, we've had many moments like that, right? It's just always special. There's always like a certain bond, especially when you're just like I said, you're sweating, you're working really hard, and then you're like pushing each other.
Well, and you remember, like, no AC in gyms, you're mopping the floor halfway through the workout because it's sweating. And it was just, he was in town because he was from near Kingston and I was in Kingston. So it was like every summer together, you name it. So it was a really, really kind of special relationship to me.
That's awesome. Okay. Funniest basketball story. It can be anywhere. It can be on the bus. It doesn't have to necessarily be on the court. It can be just anything.
We have a lot of, as you know, there's a lot of great stories that you would never tell in person
Of
or
course.
in
Of
public.
course.
I will tell this one. It was as a player, and it was fantastic. We were playing at Ryerson in the old Ryerson gym, Kerr Hall, and their point guard was leading the country in scoring. Rip someone, like pick on one side, go get the ball on the other. And it was a late whistle on a steal. And he was already at half, and you could see like 6'1" dude ready to just rise on someone. And they blow a whistle. So he gets really upset and kind of spins around with the ball, almost like a pro hop or something.
Yeah.
The ball slips out of his hand and hits his head coach square in the face.
Oh.
Hard. The coach's glasses fly off. And the button on the story is the referee tees him up for throwing the ball. And the coach starts arguing the technical while his glasses are on the ground and his like eyes are watering, and the coach starts screaming about the technical foul. It would just hit me. He didn't mean to. And it was just such a,
Wow. Did the coach get, did they didn't tee the coach up, did they?
They didn't tee the coach up, but they kept the tee on the player. But yeah,
Okay.
he drilled him in the face with the ball. And it was just fantastic. Yeah.
I'm sure, that's a moment right there for sure. It's funny, someone else's funny story. I asked the same thing. It was similar, but it was during the warm-up line, and the other team, the coaches are on that same side, and someone whipped the ball, and they're bugging him, and it hit the other coach like square in the face, and they're all just standing there, right? And this coach is like, "What the heck?" Yeah. any ball, basketballs to the face are always going to be funny. It's always like,
I do actually have a Winnipeg connection to another funny story. If you're
Let's hear it.
Okay. So we were at the Westman Classic when I was a player. And over Christmas. I'm not sure if they've changed the name or not, but it was the men's.
This is when you're with Queens, right?
When I was a player with Queens.
Yeah.
And on the Saturday night, they had a dunk competition.
Mm-hmm.
So we were there, and it was like us and Sask and Laval and someone else. And the one player pulls his coach out to like mid-key and backs up to half, runs up to jump over his coach to dunk on it. Well, he takes off too late or doesn't spread his legs early enough and knees his coach square in the face.
Oh, yeah. I remember this.
Do you remember this?
Oh, absolutely.
And the coach went sliding back. And no one in the crowd knew what to do.
Anytime that kind of stuff happens, but okay. So in the moment, you're just like, but yeah, it's not funny if you're the person who's getting hit. It's not funny if you're the person hitting, but like anyone else, it's like, it's a blooper. It's a basketball blooper. I'm sorry. So it's going to be funny.
And these are what the old days were. One of the guys had a handheld camera and was shooting it. And so we're after hours in the hotel, we meet in the lobby with a bunch of other players from different teams, and we're just watching it on that little handheld camera thing over and over again. Yeah.
Oh man. Good times. It's funny. You looped in a Winnipeg story to finish it. I love it. Okay. So I always ask end the podcast for some advice. And it's simple. You've coached so much. You've kind of been all over. You've been on this super long coaching journey that's continuing now. So what type of advice would you give to coaches? And you can decide if it's, what age or if it's just general advice, but just coaches who want to succeed. If you had a group of coaches, if you're doing a coaching clinic or you had a bunch of young coaches in front of you and someone goes, "Hey, James, what should I do? What do you give me some advice? What advice would you provide them?"
I would say, especially young, especially when you do have time and you never feel like you have time, but you of course do have time.
Mm-hmm.
Make the difficult choice of effort. Over even opportunity. And a lot of time people will choose opportunity over effort. So what that means is someone will be like, "Oh, can you come in and help with this?" They show up to the opportunity willingly, but not with the effort needed, or not with the 100% needed. So they'll be there, but they'll be on the sidelines talking with their friends, or they'll try to hang out with and I saw that a lot, like whether it's 5-star or you're going to like national coaching conferences, and you see people hanging out with them, the more popular, the higher names, and they want to be in that circle. I would always say, make the choice of effort. Like you show up at a coaching clinic, offer to rebound balls, ask questions, I will openly say, we're looking at a different style of defense. I reached out to Chris Oliver, and I said, I played for him, but I reached out to him. I was like, Ollie, have you ever seen this? Have you ever seen someone do this? Is there a way to, and I'm not saying everyone should do that. He has a massive following and everything, but reach out to anyone. I went to the Quad A provincial finals in Winnipeg. I wrote down one of their press breaks. I was like, oh, I really like that. But that would have only worked if that wouldn't have worked if I wasn't giving effort, if I wasn't paying attention, if I wasn't asking questions. I was asking questions of high school coaches, like, why do you do it this way? Like, what do you? I think that's more effort than it is anything else. So choose effort. And then of course, jump on every opportunity, but do it with effort.
I like that. That effort over opportunity, like you said, because that totally makes sense. You brought the example up of like, a camp or something, and people, they want to hang out, or they want to, let's go, there's a coach's room, let's go do that, where there's games happening. Like, you should be out there. Now, again, there is time to network,
of course,
but I think that's important. Effort over opportunity. I like that one. Did you make that up on the fly?
I literally just made that up, but it made sense in my head.
I was going to say, you might have to write that down and use it. That might have to be something you use, effort over opportunity, right? You get the opportunity through the effort, right? I mean, that's kind of the idea. If the effort's not there, there's less opportunities.
I will throw this out there to the young coaches, especially. I will say, like, how that actually helped me. Halfway through my first summer at 5-star, like 5-star was very much a hierarchy of young coaches. You're doing bed checks, you're doing early morning workouts, you're doing this. Because I did all of that stuff with the amount of effort and enthusiasm that I bring to pretty much everything I do, as you can probably tell, hopefully my energy is raising. Halfway through it, like, the old heads were the ones pulling me into those conversations. Like, those were the guys who were like, hey, we're going for dinner. It's, 11 o'clock at night. Like, we're going to go have sodas. Let's go. And the other guys got left behind. I got pulled along. And it was because, a lot of them like, oh, you remind me of me when I had energy and all that kind of stuff. So I think coaches will always respect the person giving it. And so I would highly suggest that it's not who's cool enough. It's not who knows the most. It's like who's willing to put in the work. And that's what coaches always respect. And I would say that to players as well. Coaches respect the effort more than anything.
Given you shall receive. I love it. I like that. It's a great way to end.
Cheers.
Let's just end it there, James. I appreciate it. It was super, super awesome learning about you. I know I haven't been around Manitoba in a while, and obviously there haven't been really many games, so I haven't been to a game in a long time. However, I say all that just to say that when everything resumes and there's opportunity, if I'm in the gym, I'm definitely going to be shouting you out. So you might just hear me yell and do like that, or I might come up and find you. But good luck in adjusting to Manitoba and becoming part of the community. It's a great community. Brand's a great community. The basketball community here in Manitoba is great. And I know that I'm sure you've probably made connections already, but just as you said, hey, reach out to people. I know there's people that would, that are open to network and talk. And so I'm hoping that you make some really cool connections kind of as the years go on.
Cool. Can I add one thing?
Absolutely.
Awesome. For people who don't know me a lot of the time, two things you'll always get from me: 100% energy and enthusiasm, and then 100% honesty. So with me saying this, if there are coaches who want to reach out to me, they can email me, they can shoot me like a direct message on Instagram. You can do any of that kind of stuff. I'm here for it. Like my background is in coach education as well. So I would love to help people in any way possible. And come out to games, come support U Sport basketball, come support OCAA or CAA, whatever it is. go enjoy the basketball that you can see. Experiencing a live event and seeing basketball live, the amount of times people who remember what basketball used to be like in Canada some of the time come out and go, oh, wow, this is different.
Yeah.
But the greatest compliment I can ever give, or I can ever get from people, is like, wow, I didn't know university basketball could be this fast, this fun. Wow. You know, I didn't know women's basketball is so athletic, so physical. You know, it's nice to see both young boys and girls coming out and watching women's and men's basketball and being like, wow, this is cool. So please come out, check it out. If you haven't been out, come watch it. It is an amazing brand of basketball. And I think we have hidden gems all over the country that people need to kind of discover and enjoy.
I agree. Well said. We will end it there.
Cheers.
Great talking. Okay.
Awesome. See you guys.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Please like, subscribe, follow, and share this series, and reach out to us with your comments on the show. Thanks again for joining us.